Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Picture a sweltering August afternoon in New York City, the kind of sticky, oppressive heat that turns everyone into walking bundles of irritation. A weary commuter drags himself onto a Madison Avenue bus, already bracing for the usual grim, silent shuffle home through traffic. But then something strange happens. The bus driver, this middle-aged guy with the most genuine, infectious smile, looks right at him and says, "Hi, how you doing?" And he doesn't just do it for him. He greets every single person stepping aboard with the same warmth. At first, people are caught off guard. They're locked in their own little bubbles of grumpiness, barely managing a grunt in response. But as the bus inches through the gridlock, something almost magical begins to happen. The driver keeps up this running commentary for everyone, pointing out a fantastic sale at Macy's, raving about a new exhibit at the museum, chatting about a movie that just opened. His genuine joy in these simple things, his delight in just being alive in the city, starts to work on people like a spell. By the time passengers begin filing off the bus, those hard shells of irritation have cracked open. When the driver cheerfully calls out, "So long, have a great day," each person actually smiles back. This bus driver, in his own humble way, was performing daily miracles, transforming the mood of complete strangers, softening hearts, and sending ripples of positivity out into the urban jungle. This story opens Daniel Goleman's masterpiece, Emotional Intelligence, and it perfectly captures what the entire book is about. It shows us a quiet kind of power, a different breed of smarts that has absolutely nothing to do with test scores or fancy degrees. When Emotional Intelligence hit the shelves in 1995, it exploded. Millions of copies sold worldwide, dozens of translations, and suddenly everyone was talking about this thing called EQ. Goleman, who was writing for the New York Times covering science, didn't actually invent the term. He credits psychologists John Mayer and Peter Salovey for that. But he took this academic concept and showed the world why it matters so profoundly. For decades, we'd been obsessed with IQ as the ultimate yardstick for measuring human potential. But Goleman posed a question that was both disarmingly simple and revolutionary. If IQ is supposedly everything, why do some brilliant people with sky-high IQs crash and burn spectacularly, while others with perfectly average IQs absolutely thrive? His answer? A completely different set of skills he called emotional intelligence. And here's what I'm promising you today. You're going to discover exactly what those skills are. You'll learn about the hidden battles raging inside your own mind, understand why you sometimes do things you can't believe you did later, and most importantly, and this is the really exciting part, you'll see that this other kind of intelligence isn't something you're just stuck with from birth. You can actually learn it, you can develop it, and honestly, mastering it might just be the single most important thing you ever do for your success and happiness. So let's dive in. Let me tell you about Jason, this brilliant high school kid. Straight-A student, sharp as they come, completely driven, with his heart set on Harvard Medical School. In his mind, everything, his entire future, his identity, his worth, was riding on maintaining a perfect academic record. Then his physics teacher, Mr. Polagrudo, gave him an 80 on a quiz. A, B. For Jason, this wasn't just a grade. In his mind, it was a wrecking ball swinging at his entire dream. And believing his future was genuinely in jeopardy, he did something that seems absolutely insane for someone so intelligent. He brought a butcher knife to school. During a confrontation in the physics lab, he actually stabbed his teacher before other people could stop him. How does someone that smart do something that catastrophically dumb? This is the puzzle Daniel Goleman sets out to solve. We've been operating under this myth that our intellect, our logical, rational mind, is sitting in the driver's seat, steering our lives. But Goleman pulls back the curtain and shows us that's simply not true. In reality, we've got two minds operating side by side. There's the rational mind, the thinking, analyzing, pondering part. That's the part of you processing these words right now. But then there's this other system of knowing, the emotional mind. It's impulsive, incredibly powerful, and sometimes completely divorced from logic. It's the difference between thinking something makes sense on paper and feeling in your bones that it's the right move. To understand why the emotional mind holds so much power, we need to take a quick trip back in time, way back, millions of years, to see how our brains actually evolved. Our brains didn't just pop into existence fully formed. They grew from the bottom up, like a building. The most ancient part is the brainstem, sitting at the top of your spinal cord. That's the foundation, handling basic survival functions, breathing, metabolism, keeping you alive. It doesn't think or learn, it just keeps the machine running. From this brainstem, the emotional centers, what we call the limbic system, emerged. This added emotions to our toolkit. When you're consumed by a craving, burning with rage, or dizzy with new love, that's your limbic system running the show. Only much later, millions of years later, did the thinking brain, the neocortex, evolve on top of everything else. The fact that the thinking brain literally grew out of the emotional brain tells you everything about their relationship. We had an emotional brain long before we had a rational one. Buried deep within this emotional brain is this tiny almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your emotional alarm system, your neural security guard. It's constantly scanning everything you see, hear, and experience, asking one primitive, urgent question. Is this dangerous? Is this something that could hurt me? Should I be afraid? If the answer is yes, the amygdala reacts in a flash. It's like a neural tripwire. It hijacks the entire brain, declaring a full-scale emergency before the thinking brain has even finished processing what's actually happening. Goleman calls this an emotional hijacking. Think about the last time you completely lost it. Maybe you exploded at someone you love, said things you absolutely didn't mean. Later, when you'd calmed down, you probably thought, I don't know what came over me. That feeling, that sense of being possessed by something, is the signature of an amygdala hijacking. Goleman shares this tragic story about Richard Robles and what became known as the Career Girl murders. Robles broke into an apartment, thinking nobody was home. But one of the young women, Janice Wiley, was there. He tied her up. Just as he was about to leave, her roommate walked in. As he started restraining her too, Janice made the fatal mistake of warning him that she'd remember his face and help the police catch him. Robles, who had promised himself this was absolutely his last crime, panicked. He completely lost all control. In a frenzy of rage and terror, he grabbed a soda bottle and attacked both women, killing them. Years later, reflecting on that moment, he said, I just went bananas. My head just exploded. His head didn't explode. His amygdala hijacked him. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux discovered exactly how this hijacking works. When you see or hear something, those sensory signals first travel to a part of your brain called the thalamus. From there, the signal splits into two paths. Most of it takes the high road to your neocortex, your thinking brain, which carefully analyzes everything to figure out the best response. But a smaller, faster chunk of that signal takes a low road, this neural shortcut that runs directly from the thalamus straight to the amygdala. This back-alley route lets the amygdala get a crude, quick and dirty signal and start reacting before your neocortex has even finished its careful analysis. This emergency shortcut is an evolutionary lifesaver. If you're hiking and spot a long, curved shape on the trail, your amygdala screams, "Snake!" and you jump back instantly. A split second later, your neocortex catches up and realizes it was just a stick. But for our ancestors, that tiny delay could have meant death. The amygdala's motto is basically, react first, ask questions later. The problem is, this quick and dirty system is sloppy. It works on rough pattern matching. If something happening right now has even one or two elements that feel similar to a painful memory from your past, the amygdala can flag it as a match and trigger all those old feelings, fear, anger, sadness, even when they don't fit the current situation. This is why sometimes a harmless comment can provoke a massive overreaction. Your emotional mind is treating the present like it's the past, all over again. This brings us back to Jason. His high IQ lived in his neocortex, but his Harvard dream was wrapped up in his emotional brain, tied to his entire sense of identity and worth. When he got that 80, his amygdala didn't see a number on a page. It saw a mortal threat to everything he was, and in that moment, it completely hijacked his brilliant rational mind, leading to a senseless tragedy. So if we're all wired for these emotional hijackings, what can we possibly do about it? How do we stop being prisoners of our own passions? This is where emotional intelligence enters the picture. Goleman, building on Mayer and Solovy's work, breaks it down into 5 crucial skills. These are the antidotes to emotional hijacking, the tools for getting your two minds to work together instead of against each other. The first, and absolutely most fundamental skill, is knowing your emotions. Self-awareness. Goleman tells this great old Japanese tale about a belligerent samurai who storms up to a Zen master and demands he explain the difference between heaven and hell. The monk just looks at him with contempt and says, "You're nothing but a crude peasant. I can't waste my time with the likes of you." The samurai's honor is attacked. He flies into a rage, yanks out his sword, and roars, "I could kill you for that." The monk calmly replies, "That is hell." The words hit the samurai like cold water. Suddenly seeing the fury that had completely overtaken him, he calms down, slides his sword back into its sheath, and bows deeply, thanking the monk for the insight. "And that," the monk says with a slight smile, "is heaven." The samurai's sudden awakening to his own emotional state shows the crucial difference between being in a feeling and being aware that you're in a feeling. This self-awareness is the absolute keystone of emotional intelligence. It's this neutral observing mode where part of your mind can watch your feelings without getting completely swept away by them. It's the difference between being consumed by rage and having the thought, "I'm feeling angry right now." That simple shift in perspective is incredibly powerful. It's the first step toward actually gaining control. Some people seem to have this naturally. Psychologist John Mayer calls them self-aware. They have real clarity about their emotional lives. When they slip into a bad mood, they don't spiral into endless rumination. They recognize what's happening and can start to shift out of it. Others are engulfed. They feel completely swamped by their emotions, utterly helpless to escape them. They genuinely feel they have zero control over their emotional life. And some people are accepting. They might be pretty clear about what they're feeling, but they just accept their moods without trying to change them. This works fine if you're in a good mood, but it's a pattern you often see in people who've become resigned to their own depression or despair. The ultimate failure of self-awareness is this condition called alexithymia, from the Greek meaning no words for emotion. People with alexithymia literally have no idea what they're feeling. Goleman describes Gary, this successful surgeon, who drove his fiancée absolutely crazy because he was emotionally completely flat. He could talk brilliantly about science, art, philosophy, but when it came to his own feelings, total silence. He simply didn't know what he felt. This lack of self-awareness extends to losing your gut feelings. We all know that sense of intuitive knowing about a decision. Goleman introduces us to Elliot, this guy who had a brain tumor removed from his prefrontal lobes, the part of the brain that connects our emotional centers to our thinking centers. After surgery, Elliot was intellectually just as sharp as ever. His IQ was unchanged. But his life completely fell apart. Couldn't hold a job. His wife left him. He made one disastrous financial decision after another. His neurologist, Antonio Damasio, figured out the problem. Elliot had lost all access to his feelings. He could rationally analyze the pros and cons of any decision with crystal clarity, but because he felt absolutely nothing, every option seemed perfectly neutral to him. He couldn't even decide on a date for his next appointment because he had no preference whatsoever. Elliot's story teaches us something profound. Our gut feelings, our emotions, aren't enemies of good decision-making. They're absolutely essential guides. They're the emotional wisdom we've accumulated from all our past experiences, sending us signals that point us in the right direction. Without access to that wisdom, pure reason is blind. The second domain of emotional intelligence builds directly on the first, managing emotions. Once you're aware of your feelings, you can start to manage them. And this doesn't mean stuffing them down or pretending they don't exist. Every feeling has value and purpose. A life without passion would be a barren wasteland. The goal, as Aristotle put it, is appropriate emotion. It's about balance. Keeping our distressing emotions in check is the key to emotional well-being. Think about anger. Of all the negative emotions, Goleman says anger is the most seductive. That self-righteous inner monologue that fuels it can feel genuinely exhilarating. It gives you this surge of energy and purpose. This is why the popular idea of catharsis, that venting your rage makes you feel better, is so persistent and so wrong. Research shows it's actually a complete myth. More often than not, venting anger just pumps up your emotional brain's arousal, leaving you even angrier than before. It's literally like throwing gasoline on a fire. So what actually works? One of the most powerful ways to diffuse anger is to challenge the thoughts fueling it. Anger almost always starts with a trigger thought. Imagine someone cuts you off on the highway. Your first thought might be, "That idiot! He could have killed me!" That thought spawns another, and another, each one adding more fuel to the fire. Your body floods with adrenaline, preparing for a fight. But what if you had a different thought? Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe he's rushing to the hospital with an emergency. That more charitable interpretation can short-circuit the entire rage cycle before it fully ignites. Another key strategy is giving yourself a cool-down period. This means physically removing yourself from the situation for a bit. Go for a walk. Listen to music. Distraction is genuinely powerful, because it's really hard to stay angry when you're doing something pleasant. But this only works if you don't spend that time ruminating on the angry thoughts. You have to truly shift your attention. The same principles work for managing anxiety. Worry is at the heart of all anxiety. In a sense, it's useful. It's our mind rehearsing what might go wrong and how we'd handle it. But chronic worry is basically a low-grade emotional hijacking. It just recycles the same fears over and over without ever actually finding solutions. Psychologist Thomas Borkovec found that the best way to control worry is, again, through self-awareness and challenging the thoughts. First, catch the worry as it's starting. Then apply a relaxation technique, like deep breathing. And finally, take a critical look at those worrying thoughts. Ask yourself, is this terrible thing actually likely to happen? What are some constructive steps I could actually take right now? And what about sadness? Melancholy is part of being human. Sadness after a loss is actually necessary. It forces us to slow down, to mourn, to adjust to our new reality. But when it morphs into depression, it becomes paralyzing. One of the biggest dangers in depression is rumination, endlessly circling back to what's making you sad. This passive dwelling in sadness just makes it so much worse. The most effective strategies for lifting a bad mood are active ones. Challenge those depressing thoughts directly. Schedule something pleasant and distracting. A funny movie, dinner with friends. Aerobic exercise is another remarkably powerful mood lifter because it literally changes your body's physiological state. And one of the most potent but least used antidotes is helping someone else. Depression thrives on self-absorption. Helping another person lifts you out of yourself. The third skill of emotional intelligence is what Goleman calls the master aptitude, motivating yourself. This is about harnessing your emotions in service of a goal. It's about channeling feelings like enthusiasm, persistence, and confidence to drive yourself toward achievement. Goleman shares this personal story from his college days. He was a freshman facing a calculus exam he hadn't studied for. He sat there for an entire hour, completely paralyzed by fear. His mind just raced with thoughts of all the terrible consequences. He couldn't think straight. His anxiety totally swamped his ability to even attempt solving the problems. This is what powerful negative emotions do. They sabotage what psychologists call working memory, the mental scratch pad where you hold the information you need to complete a task. As one business consultant bluntly put it, stress literally makes people stupid. But positive emotions do the opposite. They actually enhance our ability to think flexibly and plan effectively. Consider the famous, quote, marshmallow test this study psychologist Walter Mischel conducted. He brought 4-year-olds into a room, one at a time, and put a marshmallow in front of them. He told them he had to step out for a bit. If they could wait without eating the marshmallow until he came back, they'd get 2 marshmallows. But if they couldn't wait, they could have the one right now. It's this perfect little test of the battle between impulse and restraint. Some kids grabbed the marshmallow the instant the door closed. But others fought the temptation with everything they had. They covered their eyes, talked to themselves, sang songs, even tried to fall asleep. They found ways to delay gratification. The truly astonishing part came 12 to 14 years later, when researchers tracked these kids down as they were graduating from high school. The difference was dramatic. The kids who'd been able to wait for the second marshmallow were now more socially competent, self-assured, and way better at handling life's frustrations. They were more confident and dependable. And they were far superior as students. Their SAT scores were, on average, a whopping 210 points higher than the kids who'd grabbed the marshmallow immediately. At age 4, this simple test of impulse control was a better predictor of their SAT scores than their IQ was at that same age. The ability to delay gratification is truly a master skill. It's the foundation of all emotional self-regulation, and it underpins achievement of every kind, from sticking to a diet to earning a medical degree. Hope and optimism are also incredibly powerful motivators. Psychologist C.R. Snyder defines hope as believing you have both the will and the way to accomplish your goals. He found that in college freshmen, their level of hope was actually a better predictor of their first semester grades than their SAT scores. Optimism, hope's close cousin, is all about how you explain your successes and failures to yourself. Martin Seligman, A psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania discovered that optimists see a failure as something temporary, specific to that situation, and changeable. A pessimist sees it as permanent, universal, and the result of some personal flaw they can never change. Seligman tells the story of Matt Biondi, this American swimmer, at the 1988 Olympics. He was expected to win 7 gold medals, but in his first 2 events he suffered absolutely heartbreaking defeats. Sports commentators predicted he'd be emotionally crushed. But Biondi, who Seligman had tested and found to be a remarkable optimist, completely rebounded and went on to win gold in his next 5 events. His optimism acted as a psychological buffer against hopelessness and despair. This is why, Seligman discovered, optimistic insurance salespeople sell dramatically more than pessimistic ones. Every no is a small defeat. The optimist tells himself, "I'm just using the wrong approach," and tries something different. The pessimist tells himself, "I'm a failure at this," and gives up. The ultimate state of harnessing emotions for performance is what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls flow. You might know it as being in the zone. It's that state of blissful, effortless absorption in a task where you completely lose track of time and self-consciousness. Flow happens when you're engaged in a task that slightly stretches your abilities. If it's too easy, you're bored. If it's way too hard, you're anxious. Flow exists in that sweet spot between boredom and anxiety. Being able to enter flow is emotional intelligence at its absolute finest. The 4th skill is recognizing emotions in others, or empathy. Empathy is the fundamental people skill. It builds directly on self-awareness. The more open you are to your own emotions, the more skilled you'll be at reading other people's feelings. People's emotions are rarely spelled out in words. The real key to empathy is reading nonverbal cues, tone of voice, gestures, facial expressions, body language. Goleman says the roots of empathy can be traced all the way back to infancy. Virtually from the day they're born, babies get upset when they hear another baby crying. This is the earliest precursor to empathy. By the time they're a year or 2 old, they start actively trying to comfort others. Goleman shares this adorable story of 15-month-old Michael, who saw his friend Paul crying. Michael went and got his own teddy bear to give to Paul. When Paul kept crying, Michael went and got Paul's security blanket for him. This ability to feel with another person is profoundly shaped by our earliest relationships. Psychiatrist Daniel Stern studied these tiny, repeated exchanges between parents and babies. He calls the most critical moments attunement. Attunement is when a parent senses what their child is feeling and reflects it back to them, not by just copying, but by matching the feeling in a different way. A baby squeals with delight, and the mother gives him a little jiggle that matches his level of excitement. These countless small moments of attunement give an infant the deeply reassuring feeling of being emotionally connected, of being truly understood. When parents consistently fail to attune to a child's feelings, the child gradually begins to avoid expressing, and perhaps even feeling, those emotions. The emotional cost of this chronic misattunement can be absolutely devastating. The lack of empathy has a genuinely dark side. It's a fatal flaw common to rapists, child molesters, and violent criminals. Their complete inability to feel their victim's pain allows them to justify their horrific acts with lies like, "she wanted it," or, "I'm not really hurting the child." The total inability to feel empathy or remorse is the defining characteristic of a psychopath. Psychopaths can be charming and charismatic, but they're completely cold inside. Goleman argues this may stem from an actual neural defect. Research by Robert Hare has shown that psychopaths' brains don't react to emotionally charged words like kill the way normal brains do. And when they're about to receive an electric shock in an experiment, they show no signs of the normal fear response. Because they don't feel fear themselves, they fundamentally can't feel the fear and pain of their victims. Empathy, then, is the root of genuine caring. It's the foundation of morality itself. To feel with another person is to care about them, and that caring is what moves us to act, to help, to build a more compassionate and just world. This leads us to the fifth and final skill, handling relationships. This is the art of managing emotions in other people. It requires all the other skills we've talked about: self-awareness, self-management, and empathy working together. Goleman introduces us to this remarkable toddler named Jay, just 2.5 years old. His older brother Len is crying after being scolded by their mother. Jay, who was actually the original injured party in whatever conflict started this, becomes incredibly concerned. He tries absolutely everything to soothe his brother. He pleads, "Stop crying, mate." He tries to get their mother to help. He pats his brother's back comfortingly. He helps put away the toys that caused the argument. He tries to distract him with a toy car. He even tries borrowing his mother's firm tone, threatening, "Smack your bottom." Jay's amazing repertoire of tactics shows just how early this social artistry can emerge. Being able to manage emotions in others is the absolute core of interpersonal effectiveness. One of the most powerful ways we influence others is through emotional contagion. Emotions are literally contagious, like a virus. We're constantly broadcasting emotional signals in every encounter, and we catch moods from each other. This happens almost entirely unconsciously, through subtle mimicry of facial expressions, posture, and tone of voice. Have you ever been in a great mood, then spent just a few minutes with someone who was really grumpy, and felt your own mood start to sour? Or the reverse, felt down but been lifted by someone's cheerful energy? That's emotional contagion in action. The direction of mood transfer usually flows from the person who's more emotionally expressive to the one who's more passive. The mark of a powerful leader, a magnetic performer, or simply a genuinely charming person is the ability to set the emotional tone of an interaction, to carry others along with their mood. This emotional brilliance is perfectly captured in this wonderful story Goleman shares from his friend Terry Dobson, one of the first Americans to study the martial art of Aikido in Japan. One afternoon, Terry was riding a train in Tokyo when this huge, drunk, belligerent laborer stumbled on and started terrorizing the other passengers. Terry, who was a master of Aikido, felt he had to do something. But just as he was preparing to intervene physically, this tiny, elderly Japanese man in a kimono gave a joyous shout, "Hey!" He beckoned the drunk over with the warmest smile. "What you been drinking?" the old man asked, genuinely interested. "Sake," the drunk bellowed back, "and it's none of your business." "Oh, that's wonderful," the old man replied enthusiastically. "You see, I love sake too." He went on to talk about the persimmon tree in his garden, and how he and his wife enjoyed a little bottle of sake together in the evenings. As the old man spoke with genuine warmth, the drunk's face began to soften. His fists slowly unclenched. He started talking about how he loved persimmons, too. The old man then gently asked him about his wife. "No," the laborer said, his voice suddenly cracking. "My wife died." He broke down sobbing and began telling the old man the sad story of his life, losing his wife, his home, his job, his sense of worth. As Terry got off the train, he looked back and saw the drunken laborer with his head in the old man's lap, like a child being comforted. That, Goleman says, is emotional brilliance in action. The old man didn't fight aggression with aggression. He used empathy, genuine warmth, and attunement to completely disarm the man's rage and connect with the pain and sorrow underneath. These 5 skills, self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, and handling relationships, are the essential building blocks of emotional intelligence. But where do we actually learn them? Our first school for emotional learning is our family. In this intimate laboratory, Goleman says, we learn how to feel about ourselves, how others will react to our feelings, and how to manage our emotional world. Parents who are emotionally intelligent act as emotional coaches for their children. When their child is upset, they see it as an opportunity to teach. They help the child name their feelings, they show genuine empathy, and they help the child find positive ways to handle the emotion. The impact of this kind of parenting is enormous. Children with emotionally intelligent parents are better at managing their own emotions. They get upset less often and recover faster. They're more popular with their peers, and they even perform better academically. But what if you're born with a difficult temperament? What if you're naturally a shy, fearful child? Is that your destiny? The answer, Goleman shows convincingly, is no, temperament is not destiny. Jerome Kagan, a psychologist at Harvard, has studied shy children for decades. He found that about 15 to 20% of infants are born behaviorally inhibited. They have an overexcitable amygdala, meaning their neural alarm system is set on a hair trigger. They're more reactive to even mild stress. But Kagan found something fascinating. Not all of these timid infants grow up to be shy adults. The difference was how their parents handled their fearfulness. Parents who were overprotective, who tried to shield their child from every potentially upsetting situation, actually made the fear worse. But parents who gently encouraged their children to be more outgoing, who created safe opportunities for them to face their fears in small, manageable doses, helped them overcome their shyness. These experiences actually helped reshape the child's brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, teaching it new, braver responses. They were, in effect, re-educating the emotional brain. This is a crucial insight. Our brains are shaped by experience, especially during childhood. This is a precious window of opportunity for shaping lifelong emotional habits. But for far too many children today, this window is being completely wasted. Goleman paints a genuinely sobering picture of what he calls the cost of emotional illiteracy. He points to rising rates of teen violence, suicide, drug abuse, depression, and eating disorders. He shares data showing that, on average, children today are becoming lonelier and more depressed, more angry and unruly, more nervous and impulsive than the generation before them. Families are under unprecedented stress, and schools, for the most part, are completely ignoring this emotional dimension of life. And so Goleman makes a powerful case for what he calls schooling the emotions. He takes us inside pioneering schools that are teaching courses in emotional literacy or social and emotional learning. These aren't just remedial classes for troubled kids. They're for everyone. The subject is life itself. In these classes, children learn to identify and name their feelings with precision. They learn the crucial difference between feelings and actions, that feeling angry is okay, but hitting someone is not. They learn to control their impulses using simple, practical tools, like a stoplight method. Red light means stop, calm down, and think before you act. Yellow light means state the problem clearly and think of possible solutions. Green light means go ahead and try the best plan. They learn empathy by actively taking the perspective of others. They learn the delicate art of cooperation and conflict resolution. And these lessons aren't just taught in an isolated special class. They're woven into the entire fabric of the school, from the playground to the cafeteria to regular academic classes. Does it actually work? The evidence is overwhelming. Goleman summarizes results from dozens of rigorous studies. Children in these programs show significantly less aggression, better impulse control, and lower rates of anxiety and depression. They're more responsible, more cooperative, and more genuinely caring toward others. And here's the part that should make every parent and educator sit up and pay attention. These programs dramatically improve academic achievement. When children can manage their emotions, maintain attention, and get along with others, they become better learners. Emotional literacy isn't some distraction from the real work of school. It's the essential foundation for it. In the end, Goleman argues, this set of skills has an old-fashioned name: character. The bedrock of character is self-discipline, the ability to set aside your own immediate impulses to do right by others. And the root of genuine altruism lies in empathy, self-restraint, and compassion. If there are any two moral stances our turbulent times desperately call for, it's these. And they are both, at their core, learnable skills of emotional intelligence. When Daniel Goleman published Emotional Intelligence back in 1995, it felt like he was finally giving a name to something we'd all sensed, but could never quite put into words. We all know people who are absolutely brilliant on paper but somehow make a complete mess of their lives. And we all know others who may not have been star students, but who just seem to glide through life, building strong relationships, leading teams effectively, finding deep contentment. Goleman gave us the language to understand why. He gave us the scientific evidence to back it up. He showed us that our feelings aren't just random, messy interruptions to our rational lives. They're an ancient, powerful, and genuinely intelligent system that's trying to guide us. The problem is, most of us have never been taught how to listen to that guidance, how to understand its language, or how to work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. The most powerful lesson in this book, for me personally, is this idea of harmonizing head and heart. For centuries, we've been told that reason is king and emotions are these unruly peasants that need to be locked in the dungeon. Goleman completely turns that idea on its head. He shows us that intellect simply cannot work at its best without emotional intelligence. They're partners, not adversaries. When those partners are working together harmoniously, our lives flourish. When they're at war with each other, we struggle and stumble. This isn't just some feel-good philosophy. It's deeply practical. Think about the skills Goleman outlines: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, relationship skills. Aren't these the very skills that determine success in almost every area of life? A good marriage is essentially a long conversation built on empathy and emotional management. A successful career is built on persistence, self-motivation, and the ability to work effectively with others. A genuinely happy life is built on the ability to manage your own moods and find joy and meaning in what you do. This book is more than just a fascinating summary of research. It's a call to action. It's a passionate plea for us to completely rethink what we value, what we teach our children, and how we measure a successful, well-lived life. So how can you start applying these ideas right now, today, in your actual life? Here are a few simple, practical things you can try. First, practice simple self-awareness. Just a few times throughout your day, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Try to put a specific name to it, not just good or bad, but something more precise. Am I frustrated, anxious, hopeful, grateful, content, restless. Just naming the feeling, without judging it or trying to change it, is the first step to managing it. It's like turning a light on in a dark room. Suddenly you can see what you're dealing with. Second, practice active empathy. In your next real conversation with someone, make a conscious effort to listen not just to their words, but to the feelings behind them. Watch their body language. Listen to their tone of voice. Ask yourself, how must they be feeling right now? You don't have to fix their problems or even offer advice. Just the simple act of genuinely trying to understand will deepen your connection in a surprisingly powerful way. Finally, start to notice your own emotional hijackings. The next time you feel yourself getting really angry or anxious, instead of just being swept away, try to become the observer of your own experience. Notice it happening. Later, when you've calmed down, take a few minutes to reflect on it. What was the actual trigger? What were the specific thoughts that ran through your mind? This isn't about beating yourself up or assigning blame. It's about learning your own unique emotional patterns so you can gradually start to have genuine choice in how you respond, instead of just automatically reacting. The book ends with Aristotle's challenge, and it's the perfect summary of this entire journey. He wrote, "Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy." That is the art of emotional intelligence. It's not some destination you arrive at and you're done. It's a lifelong practice, an ongoing journey. It's the path of becoming more conscious, more compassionate, and more fully human. And it is, without a doubt, one of the most worthwhile journeys you'll ever take. That was the book summary of Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. We've covered the major themes and stories today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a travel brochure. The real adventure happens when you actually take the trip yourself. The true power of this book is in those quiet moments of reading, when a particular story, or even a simple phrase, suddenly connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has struck a chord with you, I really encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning new ideas. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you understand yourself and the people around you. Also, if you found this summary valuable, I'd be really grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another potentially life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.